Where's my ice cream?
It's here, sorry Ian,
Welcome to WatchMojoUK, and today we're taking a look at the biggest disasters from your favourite shows.
Have you actually ever eaten Thai food?
Yeah, just never made it before.
Clearly not.
First up, it's the Great British Bake Off. Number 10, Louise's Biscuit Merge. Biscuits.
What happened?
I don't know.
Though Louise had made her biscuit recipe many times before, she found herself in a nightmarish situation when her first round went into the oven and quickly collapsed on themselves, merging together to become one giant super cookie. While we certainly wouldn't mind eating it, she knew it wouldn't fly with the judges.
Louise, you've got a broken heart. You're telling me?
That broken heart cookie perfectly represented what we were feeling as viewers when we watched poor Louise go through this ordeal. The judges weren't impressed by the failed stained glass window biscuits that Louise was aiming for, and she was eliminated later that episode.
I think we can safely say these are not coming off the plate, can't we?
Number 9, Dorrit's Black Forest Collapse. Cakes. In the season premiere of the 6th series of Bake Off, the contestants were charged with making their spin on a classic Black Forest gâteau for the showstopper round. But Dorrit was off to a rough start when her mousse didn't set properly, making it impossible for her cake to retain any structural integrity.
No, because it's just a cake.
It's not just a cake.
It is just a cake.
She was understandably devastated when her gâteau completely collapsed, leaving a gooey mess instead of a pretty end result. Despite this major error though, she managed to stay in the competition for another couple of episodes after the incident. Number 8, James's Crumbling Barn. Biscuits quarterfinal.
This isn't at all my sort of baking, but I have come around to this challenge.
For the quarterfinal of the 3rd series of Bake Off, James Morton endeavoured to make a wooden frame gingerbread barn, but it ended up falling apart, forcing him to put a spooky spin on it, calling it a haunted bar, and even adding cobwebs.
It's a total disaster. It's gone from looking rather lovely to absolute disaster.
While what he intended was an indisputable failure, the end result wasn't actually that bad, and he was even named Star Baker that week. Not only that, but he ended up in the final of the show, and has been successful ever since.
If that's the look you were going for, top mark.
Number 7, Ruby's Toppling Cake. Vegan.
Yeah, so I have dowels in there because obviously it's quite a tall cake. So I want to make sure it looks all nice and sturdy. I don't want any wonky cakes.
Baking using only vegan-friendly ingredients can be tricky enough, but creating a gorgeous tiered cake without using eggs and dairy like you used to can result in complete chaos. That's what happened for Ruby in Series 9 when her showstopper couldn't stand up on its own.
I don't think that's gonna... Uh-oh.
When the clock ran out in the baker's time, her cake wasn't stable, so she was forced to leave the tent and hope for the best. But the other contestants watched helplessly from outside as the dessert slowly toppled over onto her workstation. Ooh.
Oh, it's coming, it's coming, it's wet. Oh, it's gonna fall.
Number 6, Mary's Oven Mishap. Biscuits.
Chloe, I don't think Muffins done the right thing.
What to do?
Sometimes the bakers encounter errors when working with complex techniques that are beyond any of us at home anyway. But other times, they make rookie mistakes just like anyone else would. One example of this was in Series 6 when Mary forgot to turn on her oven during the technical bake, realizing what had happened when there was no time left to fix it.
Bakers, 3 minutes on your cinnamon swirls of doom. 3 minutes.
This came as an extra shock since she had been named the first star baker of the series in the prior episode. Unfortunately, this mistake contributed to her being eliminated.
A nice texture inside. The pity there's not 8.
Number 5, John's Salty Sweets. Cake.
Oh, I've messed up big style here.
John Waite eventually became the winner of the 3rd series of Bake Off, but in the season premiere, things didn't look too hopeful for this baker. During the technical challenge, the contestants were charged with making rum babas, and John mistakenly used salt instead of sugar in his dough.
I'm just trying to slice off the salted heart of the baba. I'm fighting for my place in the competition now.
The results were about as disastrous as you would imagine, with Mary refusing to touch them and Paul spitting them out.
Oh, jeez. What is it, Paul? There's too much salt in there.
Somehow, though, John only came second to last in the ranking, managing to edge out Natasha, who was eliminated that episode. Number 4, Danny's failed fondants. Puddings.
Are you a good multitasker, Danny? I sense you are.
I
sense
am,
you are.
in some respects.
For the signature bake in the 6th episode of the 3rd season, the contestants were asked to make 2 different types of sponge pudding, and Danny opted for a banoffee pudding with walnut butterscotch sauce, as well as Jubilee chocolate fondants.
Oh no!
Oh. Just as she took her fondants out of the oven, however, 2 of them slid off the baking tray and were upended onto the floor and her trainers. She was understandably discouraged, but the blunder didn't stop her from staying in the running for another few episodes.
It's ruined. It's absolutely ruined. I'm so going out.
Number 3, Sue's muffin mistake. Bread.
That had an injury, blunt force trauma that involved my elbow.
Sometimes the bakers are the only ones to blame for the issues that befall them, but other times there is outside interference that can't be helped. In one instance of this, host Sue unintentionally put her elbow into Howard's English muffins, seriously denting them.
Howard, I need to break something to you. I think that's my elbow. I think that's my elbow on your muffin.
And this wasn't the only time one of the presenters got involved in one of the baker's creations. In a bad way. In the same series, Mel accidentally knocked over Frances's biscuit tower, but it clearly didn't impact her success because Frances would go on to win the competition.
Yep, you're okay.
Oh no. Oh God.
Number 2, Custard Gate. Desserts.
I've got to make that into proper custard, and I've got 2 types of caramel to make.
It seemed as though Howard couldn't avoid disaster in Series 4, and it started to seem like bad luck was following him everywhere. Just 1 episode after the incident with Sue and the English muffins, Howard was making an apple and caramel trifle when Deborah accidentally used the custard that he made for her own tropical trifle when she took the wrong bowl from the fridge.
Where's my custard? Oh no!
I'm so sorry, Howard.
She was appropriately apologetic and offered up her own custard for Howard to use, and luckily the judges were willing to acknowledge what had happened and judge the results accordingly.
I'm sure that 1 custard's as good as another.
No, 1 love, 1 custard.
Number 1, Bin Gate. Desserts.
It's a mess, disaster, it's revolting.
I think
Mushroom soup?
Ask any Bake Off fan what the most dramatic moment in the show's history is, and they'll undoubtedly agree it was this one. Dubbed Bin Gate by fans and the press, this incident took place in the 5th series in the Desserts episode when the contestants were asked to make versions of a baked Alaska for their showstopper.
Where's my ice cream?
It's here. Sorry, Ian.
Ian's dessert was chilling when fellow baker Diana removed it from the fridge for an indeterminate amount of time, causing it to melt in the sweltering heat. While this would have been an unfortunate occurrence, Ian made it a true disaster when he had an understandable tantrum and threw the entire dessert into the bin.
Okay, I got a sorry suggestion.
Oh! No.
Next, we're gonna look at Top of the Pops. Number 10, Oasis. Many of the shenanigans that happened on Top of the Pops over the years came from the show's dedication to miming. This was because the studio was so poorly designed that it couldn't really support live sound. But that didn't stop the guest performers from getting frustrated. Possibly Oasis's most iconic appearance on the show saw Liam and Noel Gallagher mock the setup by switching places. Noel was leaning into the microphone and Liam was trying to mime playing the guitar. It's not clear why they got away with it, but the crew noticed early enough to put up an on-screen message explaining the swap to viewers. Liam later claimed it was his idea, but you never know with these two. Number 9. Orbital. Just a year after their debut, Orbital came onto Top of the Pops to perform Chime, their very first record. It became a wildly popular song, but potentially not because of this performance, which sees the Hotnolls basically just standing there for nearly 3 minutes, with one dancer going for it behind them. However, there may have been a proper reason behind this, as the brothers were wearing clothes to protest the poll tax. A political move so controversial, it ultimately led to Thatcher's downfall, and they needed to stay still so that people could see. However, the BBC's still supposed to be apolitical, so it's no surprise the band didn't return to the show for quite a few years afterwards. Number 8. John Lennon. Since the day they met in 1966, John and Yoko were inseparable, for better or worse. And perhaps it was for worse during this particularly weird performance.
Karma's gonna get you. Gonna look you right in the face.
Lennon himself is, predictably, a magnetic and extremely talented presence, thanks to the fact they let him sing live rather than making him mime the vocals, while Yoko's sitting next to him wearing a blindfold and holding up a bunch of cardboard signs asking for peace.
Why in the world are we here? Surely not to live in pain and fear.
There's another take of the same pre-recorded performance where she's got the crochet needles out, and this also goes without explanation. Well, Instant Karma is still an outstanding song nonetheless. Number 7. Dexy's Midnight Runners. Possibly the most baffling gaffe in British television history, back in 1982, Dexy's Midnight Runners were all lined up to perform their hit song, Jackie Wilson Said. But standing there behind them, they've instead got a massive picture of Jockey Wilson, who was one of the country's foremost darts players and at the top of his career at the time. To this day, nobody knows why this happened. It's still a mystery whether it was a total mistake by someone on the crew who believed the song was about darts, or whether the band did it themselves for a joke. They've never explained. Number 6. The Pogues.
A perennial favourite now, and at the piano, the thinking man's Liberace.
It was Christmas Eve, babe.
One of the most endearing parts of Fairy Tale of New York, as well as it simply being a fantastic song, is Shane MacGowan's slurred vocals. But does that mean he should have gotten absolutely plastered ahead of this performance in the late 80s? Well, who's to say, but he certainly was extremely drunk.
You're an old slut and jumping there on the side on a trip in that bed. You scumbag, you maggot.
Unlike Lennon, MacGowan and Kirsty MacColl weren't singing live, but you can tell from MacGowan's total inability to mouth the right words or even stay in time with the music that he's had a few too many. Then again, what's Christmas without having a drink or belting out this classic?
Can't make it all alone. I build my dreams around you.
Number 5. Manic Street Preachers. Maybe Orbital was making a political statement on purpose, but according to the band, Manic Street Preachers were doing no such thing during this most complained about performance of Faster. The problem was that they were all dressed in shades of green, the green lighting, berets, and lead singer James Bradford in a balaclava with his own name on it, in the year 1994. Subsequently, viewers believed the band was making a pro-IRA statement live on the BBC, and thousands of complaints were logged, a record amount at the time. The band, who are actually Welsh, said they were doing no such thing. Number 4. New Order. Most bands weren't able to convince the BBC to let them play live. Even John Lennon's backup were miming. But New Order insisted on it when they came on to play Blue Monday, which remains one of the 1980s most iconic songs. However, not this version, which is pretty atrocious.
How does it feel when you treat me?
Again, the problem isn't necessarily the band themselves, it's the fact the Top of the Pops studio was so badly designed. Noise levels were off, the various synthesizers and electronic drums were out of time, and even Bernard Sumner wasn't doing a particularly good job on the microphone.
I thought I'd heard you speak.
Still, it's quite hard to make Blue Monday completely unenjoyable. Number 3. All About Eve. Who could forget this monumental production failure? In 1988, All About Eve were lined up to play Martha's Harbour, which had climbed to number 7 on the charts. But disaster struck. The backing track just didn't play to the band, while everybody else could hear it perfectly well. They sat there without moving far too long until realizing an error had been made by the crew that made them look ridiculous.
Rushing at the bow, I am a galley slave, my love.
It was so embarrassing for the BBC to have messed up a popular song like this that they came back next week. And this time, in a break from tradition, they were actually allowed to play live so that it didn't happen again.
I sit by the harbor.
Number 2. Travis.
So crazy. Lately, nothing seems to be going right.
A stunt gone awry. It was intentional that Travis's lead singer, Fran Healy, got hit in the head with multiple custard pies at once. However, they probably didn't intend for him to get so dizzy, and chaos promptly broke out in the studio. This was all because they were playing Sing, the music video for which features a food fight, which they somehow got permission from the BBC to recreate that day. Weirder yet though, this video actually premiered in the background while they were playing, so nobody in the audience had seen it yet, which sort of ruins the reference. And what in the world were those lobsters all about? Number 1. Nirvana. Like Oasis 4 years later, Nirvana decided to troll the show executives because they didn't like being made to mime. The BBC, however, made the mistake this time of letting Kurt Cobain sing. Because he was trying on purpose to do the absolute worst performance, he sang Smells Like Teen Spirit in its entirety while doing an impression of Morrissey.
Load up on drugs, kill your friend.
Behind him, his bandmates didn't even bother to pretend to play their instruments, totally giving up halfway through. Cobain even changed some of the lyrics to make them spicier. It remains an iconic and hilarious moment for Nirvana, but we can only imagine how the crew and producers were reacting behind the scenes watching this play out. Next on the list is I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. Number 10. Strawberry Gate. Often the trial prizes are delicious foodstuffs the celebrities have all been dreaming of in their weeks in the jungle. That was exactly the case when boxer Amir Khan and comedian Ian Lee won a huge helping of tasty strawberries and cream after doing well in a trial.
I want them. I want to eat them now.
However, rather than share the strawberries with the rest of the camp like they're supposed to, they ate all the strawberries on their way back and then lied, saying they lost.
Guys! Who gave the wrong answer?
Ian couldn't take the guilt and later confessed, with him and Amir playing the blame game over whose idea it was. Outside the jungle, both had their reputations tarnished for putting on such a bad show.
We messed up.
So you ate the strawberries and cream?
Yeah.
Number 9, no treat for G. Another case of badly behaved celebrities. During the 2020 series, one of the contestants was Giovanna Fletcher, wife of Tom Fletcher from McFly. G and Tom have 3 young sons together, and it was this detail that made it so hard to watch when she wasn't nominated by the other celebs to receive some messages from home.
She realised that there was an opportunity to not be given a message from loved ones.
She broke down in tears when she missed out on the chance to be nominated, along with AJ Pritchard and Jordan North. Tom talked publicly about how hard it was to watch his wife in the castle going without the messages, but at least she won the show that year.
Take your phone and try and tell us how you're feeling right now.
This is really comfy.
Number 8, Gemma Collins quits. When the GC is in town, you know it's only a matter of time until she throws a temper tantrum and decides to quit whatever it is she's doing. That's what I'm a Celeb viewers were waiting for when she entered the jungle in 2014, and it's what they got, but a bit sooner than anticipated. She only lasted 3 days, almost quitting at the very first hurdle when she had to parachute in from a helicopter, which she did refuse to do in the end, incidentally.
I need to get out, honestly.
You need to get out?
Yeah, I'm gonna be sick.
Still, for 3 days, we had all the insanity, crying, and shouting of Gemma Collins going down under, as well as the allegation that they're treated worse than murderers on the show.
I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. Can't do it.
Number 7, Gillian McKeith faints. A disaster for the voting public, certainly. They wanted Gillian to do yet another Bush Tucker trial and got shortchanged when she staged this infamously dramatic collapse on live TV.
Let's get Bob in.
Medics were called and the show quickly cut to an ad break, leaving viewers wondering what had happened. Though Gillian herself has maintained that the fainting fit was genuine, Alison Hammond has claimed that it wasn't the case. She was in the jungle that year too, and says Gillian confided in her that the faint was a fraud. But what do you expect from a woman who built a career on lying about being a medical doctor?
Gillian? I think it's best if we go to a break right now and give Gillian the attention she needs. We'll find out if she can do it after the break. See you in a few minutes.
Number 6, Jack Maynard gets kicked off.
Once I actually fell asleep, I didn't keep waking up in the middle of the night or anything.
It's not too often that contestants are kicked off by the producers, rather than them getting eliminated or simply deciding the jungle is too much for them. That's what makes the fallout from Jack Maynard's addition to the show so dramatic. It all came about because somebody dug up Maynard's history of using extremely offensive language online, not to mention that he had been caught behaving inappropriately towards a young female fan.
I wouldn't do that because when I feel like I don't know enough about it, and my audience wouldn't be too interested in that.
The media circus got so intense that ITV bosses were forced to remove him from the show, though Maynard said he agreed to leave so that he'd be able to fight back against the allegations, as they're not allowed to communicate with the outside world on the show.
I think it's really important that he has a right to reply.
Number 5, Noel Edmonds. A late entrance in 2018, a lot of fanfare was sounded over Noel Edmonds' arrival, which makes sense considering the exorbitant amount of money ITV paid to get him on board. When he entered the show, he was named the Emperor.
How are you feeling about being Emperor?
Fantastic. Absolutely wonderful and moist.
However, the viewers didn't really like this, and only a few days later, Edmonds became the first person to be voted off.
Oh. Am I supposed to look disappointed?
His rather quick exit kick-started rumours of a fix at ITV, with many claiming that he'd already prepared to leave before his elimination was revealed. The fix has been hotly denied by Edmonds and ITV, and it's not entirely clear why ITV would pay so much money for him only to have him booted off first.
There was a Noel Edmonds lookalike who did all the stuff, and I got to keep the boots and the hat.
Number 4, central heating. In 2020, production moved away from Australia to Gaffes in North Wales. Suffice to say, Wales is a lot colder than Australia in November time when the show airs. So viewers were a little confused when they saw the celebs looking a little too toasty in the draughty ruined castle. Some of them weren't even wearing coats and jackets.
And the good news is, it's Shane's turn again.
Production came out and said that with it being a medieval castle, it obviously didn't have any central heating. However, the conspiracy didn't die, and eventually we found out that there were top secrets, additional heating lamps in there to keep the celebrities warm. It was downright scandalous.
Were there heaters in there, Vernon?
There was one heater in my living quarters.
Number 3, Sausage Revolt.
He headed up the team as they rushed security, stormed the bridges and started a full-scale confrontation!
Nowadays, the celebs heading into the jungle, or alternatively into the castle, know that they're probably not going to be having 3 square meals a day. They're usually doing pretty grueling challenges for food, which frequently leaves them with very little to eat of substance, making subsequent challenges even harder. But this was back in Series 2, and it seems they weren't prepared. Upon receiving only 1 sausage each for dinner, which honestly isn't too bad compared to some meals we've seen, celebrity chef Anthony Worrell-Thompson led a sausage rebellion, where the celebs threatened to walk off and go on strike if they weren't given a proper scran.
If we want to get out, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, and we're all going to do that.
Number 2, The Rat. Speaking of dodgy meals, the celebs were so hungry in the 2009 series that another celebrity chef, this time Gino D'Acampo, took it upon himself to rustle up some grub.
Would you roast rabbit? I fillet it and put into the risotto.
That grub turned out to be an actual rat that was caught and killed by Stuart Manning when it came into the camp, and was promptly cooked up by Gino so that they could get a bit of protein in them.
And you start to fry everything together, so the flavor of the rat gets into the beans. Absolutely fantastico.
This turned out to be a dire situation, causing a massive rift between the I'm a Celeb production crew and the Australian RSPCA. ITV actually got fined by the Aussies over the fiasco, and was forced to apologise for not intervening when Gino suggested killing the animal.
I'm so proud that none of them, said anything. They just ate it, they loved it, and it's a fantastic experience.
Number 1, Storm Arwen. The first winter storm of 2021 turned out to be one of the most brutal in recent memory, wreaking havoc across Scotland, Northern England, and North Wales, right where Griff Castle is. I'm a Celeb was still running, but for the first time, production had to be shut down completely for 3 days, while they weathered Storm Arwen.
The production compound of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here was hit by the storm in the early hours of Saturday, forcing the programme makers to cancel the show temporarily.
The contestants were taken away to stay elsewhere while chaos reigned on set, with some parts of the crew's headquarters, as well as the castle itself suffering damage. To make matters even worse, some troublemakers broke in and had to be removed by the security team for the 2nd time that year.
Griff Castle has weathered many storms in its 200-year history. It, like the celebs, should be able to handle a few more.
Now it's time to look at some Grand Designs disasters. Number 10, Britain's cheapest house. Though a lot of Grand Designs builds end up failing because the owners are just too ambitious and spend way too much money, that wasn't the case for this low-impact home in Pembrokeshire.
As far as I can tell, Simon and Jasmine are starting to build their family home with just £500 in the bank. That is adventurous.
The goal of the Dales is to build the cheapest and most eco-friendly house in the UK, which will be completely self-sustaining and won't cause any damage to the environment. They also did a lot of the construction work themselves, impressively.
This is going to be medium hobbity.
Medium hobbity?
I think this is a bit more kind of medium to full strength.
But tragedy struck in 2018, only 2 years after the episode aired, when the house was caught in an accidental fire that destroyed the entire structure. They were some of the few people on Grand Designs we didn't want to see fail. Number 9, Lime Kiln House.
Right. Something to grow out of the ground that was fitting and appropriate and that would
still be fitting and appropriate in 50 years, 100 years' time.
This build is frequently touted as one of the show's best, and it would have been had Prue and Richard not completely ignored the local authorities' guidance for the house they wanted to build. Specifically, they had to preserve the Victorian lime kilns and create a house that blends in with the surrounding countryside.
However I look at this building, and wherever I look at it from, it doesn't yet slip noiselessly into its beautiful surroundings.
They fail dramatically at the latter, instead building an enormous modernist mansion featuring a lot of right angles and huge walls made of glass. It sticks out like a sore thumb in the rural corner of Midlothian they're living in, and that's why it was a disaster.
I think it works beautifully in its landscape.
Number 8, contemporary barn conversion. Apparently, not a lot of people want to buy derelict former farm buildings in the middle of nowhere to live in. Who would have known?
This is going to be your home.
Yep.
That didn't stop Jane and Robert, however, the latter of whom had grown up in the area and had apparently been eyeing this old barn for years. To add insult to injury, they also spent £250,000 on the barn, which they then needed to spend even more on to do a full conversion.
And as this one's ground to a halt because of miscommunication and because of miscalculation, I suppose above all because of Jane and the architect who've sort of miscalculated how much they need to be on top of this project.
The barn is also extremely dark and they can't get planning permission to add more windows, making it almost completely unsustainable as a home. Jane also decided that instead of keeping the architect on, she was going to manage the whole project herself. Why?
When it came here, I just put my hands over my head, virtually cried. I thought it was absolutely dreadful.
Number 7, Miami Beach House. When you really get down to it, how many differences actually are there between Devon and Florida? Well, a lot, unfortunately for Julie and Mark.
I don't know, this is scary. Mark and I can't relax until this bit's done.
They wanted to build their Miami dream home on the Devon coast in honor of the fact they've been to Miami a few times and quite liked it. Like all good modernist homes, one entire side of the building is made of floor-to-ceiling windows with a sea view. The simple fact is that though a house like this might look great in Miami, it looks downright ridiculous after being transplanted to the Devon coast.
Julie has got her Miami beach house, and they've moved in.
It's also right on the seafront, so is doomed to someday fall into the ocean. Number 6, the Clifftop House.
You know that parable of the wise man who built his house on rock and the foolish man who built his house on sand? Well, this is the story of a man who built his house on a crumbling cliff.
Yet again, we have someone who thought they could defeat nature by building a modernist mansion right on the edge of a cliff, despite this always being a doomed endeavor. And this cliff is worse than many others, since it's already crumbling into pieces and constantly battered by strong winds and waves.
It seems hopeless, but it's all Rob's allowed to do.
Kevin doesn't hold back criticizing their decision to build there either, claiming that the coastline loses 6 inches every year, meaning it's not going to last very long at all. They also say the house will bring architecture to North Wales, which is more than a little patronising to all the people living there already.
This is a jaw-droppingly beautiful home, which could collapse into the sea in less than 60 years because of the fast-eroding cliff.
Number 5, the Curve.
Is the house itself going to be something of a work of art?
Probably all of it.
Some houses are all about the gimmick. And in the case of the Curve, the gimmick was, well, it was curved. Though this sounds simple to anyone not versed in architecture, in actuality, building a curved house like this was extremely difficult and tremendously stressful. The build really took its toll on Barry, the visionary owner behind the idea.
You know, it's worthwhile and it'll give me pleasure every time I walk up and down it.
Sadly, Barry not only had a heart attack while working on the house because of sheer stress, but he also had to undergo 5 heart bypasses.
You know, it messed my body and my head, there's no doubt about it. I was, you know, not good for not a lot for quite a number of months.
Even sadder, though the house was eventually completed to a high standard, just a few years later Barry sold up and moved on. He did get almost £3.5 million for his trouble though. Number 4, the Birmingham Church.
How on earth are you going to convert this? What's it going to be?
Of course, Barry, who built the curve, wasn't the only Grand Design's guest to have a heart attack during filming. The man behind this church conversion had two. Unfortunately, the church was a bit of an architectural black sheep, even at the beginning, being massive and quite ugly from the outside.
But he's already spent more than half of the family's savings, and there's still so much to do.
However, being a listed building, there were a lot of original features they weren't allowed to change, and Dean also decided not to hire an architect, doing the whole thing himself.
Even when the bricklayers were in, I was the one doing all the labouring for them.
Ultimately, the project took its toll, with Dean and his wife Hilary splitting up, and Dean having to undergo surgery for the many injuries he suffered while building. Number 3, 9-story water tower.
How tall is it?
It's something like between 8 and 10 stories, so I'm not quite sure.
This 100-foot tower in the heart of London was given a new lease on life in 2012 when a couple decided to buy it and convert it into a living space. They spent millions of pounds building massive extensions to the tower, including what basically amounts to a separate house in its own right, and an enormous lift shaft next door.
Eventually it would collapse, probably another winter.
The entire project has been called cursed by those in the know, and one of the owners actually had to borrow his grandmother's credit card and run up her debts just to finish it.
It's kind of worth it, isn't it?
This is what it's about.
It later went on the market for £6.5 million, but didn't sell until the asking price had been unceremoniously slashed to £2.75 million. Number 2, Medway Eco Barge.
What we want to do here is to create something which is totally self-contained and self-sustainable, even down to the water if we can manage that.
This was another couple who didn't have a lot of money, but they did have a dream. They wanted to build a large houseboat and had already purchased an old barge to convert for a few grand. But it didn't go well from the start.
Well, hopefully it'll improve.
Should we stand around the other
what
side?
I'm giving you a bit of license here because I'm assuming that it can't get much worse than this.
They barely planned anything and wanted to use only second-hand building materials, frequently arguing with their own contractors. The builders had no guidance to go on and clearly didn't like working with the couple.
That boat, in many ways, I would say, is a wonder. It's created itself.
They also struggled to find anywhere to moor it, and it was never finished. Years on, the boat was sighted, washed up, and vandalised, having been claimed by squatters. Number 1, the lighthouse.
This project is all about trying to create something that allows Hazel and Ed to love where they are.
It's officially called Chesil Cliff House, but it's more recognisable as the ghastly, unfinished lighthouse that's been sitting on the North Devon coast for the last decade. The lighthouse was plagued with problems from the beginning, namely the fact it was on a very unstable cliff that needed to be reinforced with concrete to stop it from plunging into the sea.
We've invested so much money and time and see it like this.
It was also so windy that construction had to stop numerous times. It was an extremely difficult to implement design, and it went about £2 million over budget. The lighthouse led to the breakdown of its owner Edward's marriage, with him and his wife deciding to go their separate ways.
No, we parted company last year. I put her through a horrendous time.
He'll have to immediately sell it upon completion. Finally, here's Come Dine With Me.
Number 10, flossing. There are plenty of cringe moments on Come Dine With Me, but few are quite as bad as the guests deciding they're going to learn how to floss.
There's a party trick that my son's girlfriend's daughter taught Stuart, and he thinks he's an expert now.
After apparently being taught how to do so, Stuart stands up to demonstrate, to resounding applause from his fellow guests.
The move is, I think, sort of there. Then, boom, boom, boom. And it gets quicker.
Go on, Stuart! It's doubtful that any of them are keyed in enough to the internet culture to know how embarrassing this is to watch. But whatever Fortnite fan taught Stuart the moves has a lot to answer for. It's still embarrassing when all the men stand up to show off their dance moves. Still, you have to give them props for trying, though it was a million miles away from a victory royale.
To the right, left, up and through.
Number 9. Tiramisu con frutta. Perhaps the biggest red flag about Giovanni's dessert was his decision to make tiramisu without any coffee in the first place.
He ladles on the no-coffee tiramisu. Lots of it.
No coffee. It's very fruity. It's very creamy.
It's certainly creamy.
It's the coffee flavour that makes a tiramisu, so he was asking for trouble by trying to change up the recipe, even if he does have Italian heritage. His unique take on the dish really didn't work. It ended up looking like a horrible mess of fruity, creamy mush, like he'd left out a tub of raspberry ripple ice cream all day and ladled it onto the plates.
Here you go.
According to the guests, it didn't taste very nice either, as the fruit was overpowering. They also thought that foregoing the famous coffee and chocolate was a mistake.
It was drowning in cream, it was drowning in berries, it was suffocating in fruit.
Joe, tiramisu is made with coffee.
Okay.
Hang on.
Okay, so.
Number 8. Rob's Thai soup. Bodybuilder Rob is trying to impress with his Thai menu, inspired by his personal love of Thai food. Though he's never actually been to Thailand, we eventually find out.
Have you been to Thailand?
I know a few Thai people.
You like Thai food?
Yes, I do.
Have you actually ever eaten Thai food?
Yeah. Just never made it before.
Clearly not.
It was supposed to be tom yum soup, but the soup does a disappearing act just before it gets served.
Where's the soup gone?
That's what I was thinking. It's been absorbed by the pesky noodles.
I think it's a classic case of it going wrong.
Rob's at a loss for why the soup has ended up getting absorbed. Maybe he didn't use a big enough pot or not enough liquid, or he could have overdone it on the noodles. Regardless, the soup was just a plate of soggy noodles and chicken.
And we literally ended up with a big mush of chopped up noodle.
On the bright side, it wasn't completely inedible, but it was still a disaster that lost Rob his chance of winning.
Well, I ate it all. I was starving. But it was very, very out of a packet, I thought, with Rob. But he had a go, and you got to give him that.
Number 7. Debbie storms off. Some couples are a tour de force in the kitchen, working together like a well-oiled machine. That doesn't seem to be the case for Richard and Debbie, who have a fraught cooking experience.
When I am wrong, I will apologise.
Is that somebody else?
Ooh, this is a bit awkward now.
We find out that they actually live separately, and it's clear enough that they were struggling to share the space in Debbie's kitchen.
We have quite an unconventional relationship in that we don't actually live together. So Richard's got his own place.
So you miss each other like the heart grows fonder?
I wouldn't say that.
But when Richard makes a joke about divorce, the atmosphere is soured.
If we were married, we'd be having a divorce.
Were you still 98% right?
Yeah.
See you, Deb.
Oh.
Though it seems like it's all fun and games, there are definitely some issues growing. They leave the guests alone to settle their differences, letting all the food go cold.
Don't apologise.
Yeah, definitely do that. This is not one of her fingers, is it? That might be his heart.
Stone cold.
That evening, you could cut the atmosphere with a knife. Number 6. Dry beef. Student Ian brings his dinner party guests to his student house to entertain them, and they're quick to judge. First, there are his terrible paintings, which he claims he can sell for a pretty penny.
This one was for 16. Does that mean you took 60 seconds to do it?
Is he having a joke? I would have given him £5. It looks like a 3-year-old's painted them.
But then the food doesn't hold up either. He takes forever in the kitchen and brings out dishes that fail to impress. His starter was a slimy serving of scallops and black pudding, which the guests said reminded them of a slug. And then his main wasn't slimy enough. It was extremely overdone teriyaki beef with no sauce that nobody was keen on. They especially didn't like him forgetting the cutlery.
Right, so we've waited an hour for the main course and now we're waiting 10 minutes for the cookery.
Even Ian himself had to admit the beef was awful.
This is bloody awful. Don't eat it, we're going to McDonald's.
Number 5. Sardines. Rule number 1 of being a good dinner party guest: don't puke when you're at the table. Dave's cooking up some Ibethan tapas, which involves making a tasty tagliatelle with a less tasty tray of sardines.
The sardines, complete with eyes and tails, go under the grill.
The sardines were cooked whole with only some oil for seasoning and are clearly an acquired taste. Though some guests are brave enough to try the sardines, a few are very put off by the sight of a whole cooked fish.
Who wants the big one? Go on.
No, thank
Do you not like prawn? I don't fancy a sardine.
Come on, there's a sardine for everyone.
And then when they do try it, they don't like it either. Mark's the one who has the most trouble and nearly chucks his guts up while at the table. Karen even hands him a dish if the worst happens.
Don't vomit.
Are you okay?
Oh!
There you are, darling.
No!
No, if you're going to, do it in there.
I'm all right. That's very gracious of you, Karen.
Number 4, Sophie and Lucas's entire menu. This couple are far from conventional, and so is their food. In fact, that's the theme of their whole evening, putting together chalk and cheese and trying to make a meal out of it.
Cooked in cola? You sure? You sure about this?
That's what it says.
They start off on a weird foot by marinating their chicken wings in cherry cola and creating a blue cheese dip, then serve a bacon roly-poly for the main and flavoured brownies for pudding.
He adds bacon and spices and rolls before poaching in a tea towel.
Sleep tight, gentle prince.
Of all of those dishes, the main is by far the worst. It looks totally inedible, and indeed, some of them do struggle to get it down. It's hard to ruin something as simple as bacon and cheese, but they managed it.
The smell, the texture, the look. There wasn't one appealing thing about it.
Number 3, Claire's steaks. It's not clear whether Claire's ever actually cooked anything before signing up to compete on Come Dine With Me, but we're going to guess not. The hygiene standard in Claire's kitchen are a little lax, to say the least, as she keeps touching the food with her dirty oven gloves, even when stirring.
Oh, crikey.
Well, it's beats burning my fingers, isn't it?
Well, I suppose. How about the chips? Not the glove again.
She also mispronounces sirloin and loses track of which steak is supposed to be which.
So I'm doing a sirloin steak.
A what, sorry?
Sirloin?
What's that?
Sirloin?
Have another crack at it.
Sirloin steak.
They're all cooked in exactly the same way and sent into the microwave for the finishing touches, and about half the food ends up on the floor. Worse than the food, however, was Giovanni's attitude.
Oh, you're so full of bull. Just tell the truth. Tell the truth. Right? Then just tell
Are you
the truth.
finished?
No,
You
tell
finished?
the truth.
You put your knife and
that's
fork
it,
like
no,
you
no,
finished.
Stop. Yeah,
Giovanni.
I'm done. I'm full.
You're done.
I'm full.
Number 2, Heather Horsfall. We've seen plenty of sore losers over the years, but few are quite as vindictive as Heather Horsfall. She might be a more unpleasant dinner guest than even Peter Marsh.
It's not the best strategy, upsetting your guests. No, that's going to backfire.
She was rude the whole week, particularly to Zara for no reason, and wholly believed that she was going to win.
You were so loud and so irritating.
However, we all know that Come Dine With Me is as much about the hosting as it is about the food, and if you're rude, you're not going to win.
I don't believe this. I really don't. You put me fourth.
That was precisely what happened. Heather came dead last and promptly had a temper tantrum, swearing at the other guests and storming off in her own house.
I'm so upset with all you. I've been so honest about you. I could have given you a 0 because yours was right. Do you know what? I don't deserve fourth. I'm sorry, I'm going to bed. Forget it. I'm so upset.
Number 1, Lee's bad attitude. Why Lee thought he could win the £1,000 with this strategy is anyone's guess, but it did make for some great TV.
As the creme brulee cools off in the garden, the temperature in the kitchen is on full whack.
He welcomes the guests into his flat and then disappears into the kitchen for hours. He's done basically no preparation at all before their arrival.
I'm not being rude, but I've got to peel spuds, do the creme brulees, do the starters, do the mains.
You've still got to do the creme brulees.
I've got loads to do. Listen, no pressure.
It was a miracle they didn't all call it quits and go for a takeaway, though they did suggest it.
Shall we ring for a takeaway?
You'll get it quicker.
Where's my phone?
He didn't even bother to make one of the 2 starters, and they still didn't have the main course until after 9 o'clock at night. Lee ultimately set the record for the lowest score the show's ever seen, with a whopping 7 out of 30.
So the bottom line is...
Bottom
line is you didn't like...
I didn't like
the chicken
it.
casserole.
No, I like the chicken.
Sorry. Personally, I think you're all...
Which shows do you think we should cover next? Let us know in those comments below.
To the right, left, up and through.
Of it going wrong, I think it's just been done wrong.
Do you agree with our picks? Check out this other recent clip from WatchMojoUK and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.